If you struggle feeling safe and secure in your relationships, or if you have difficulty due to chronically unhealthy relationship dynamics, did you know that your attachment style might be at the root of the issue? Your attachment style, whether it's secure or one of the three types of insecure attachment, has a huge influence on how you perceive and operate in your relationships. In my work as a clinical psychologist, I've discovered the game-changing power of delving into and healing your attachment wounds. So, if you're seeking more joy and stability in your relationships, join me and today's top-notch attachment experts, Rebecca Webster and Pablo Alvarez, for a deep dive into the power of attachment theory. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real-life question. My girlfriend says I'm avoidantly attached. She says I keep running from her attempts to connect and have a deeper relationship. I'm tired of her talking to me about it. I think we just have different relationship styles. She asked me to write to you and give you an example. We often have conflicts. Last night, we had another fight about her messy habits. I like things neat and she throws things around. She likes to clear things up by talking about it, but I go quiet because it doesn't do any good. I don't see this as avoidant. I just don't want to waste my time. What's your opinion? And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manley, and this is Imperfect Love.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manley, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are imperfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Please note, as this episode contains sensitive information, listener discretion is advised. If you need support, please see the special links in the show notes. Today, I am joined by a tremendous duo, Rebecca Webster and Pablo Alvarez of Connection Counseling. They will be sharing their expertise on attachment theory and unhealthy relationship dynamics. Welcome to the podcast, Rebecca and Pablo. It is such a delight to have both of you with us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Carla, Dr. Carla.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. So you're located in Canada, you're professional counselors, and you have loads of experience and a passion for attachment theory. So I do too. And I know this is going to be a fabulous conversation that will be so helpful for our listeners, because often we don't even realize, even if we have a general idea of our attachment style, we don't realize how much it can control us behind the scenes. But before we launch into today's topic, would you each share just a little bit about what makes you you? We'll start with Rebecca.
Do you mean individually or as a couple?
Let's go with individually.
So I would say what makes me me is I have a passion for, mental health and counseling and helping people and connecting one-on-one with my client. I have a background in film and television and my with my relationship dynamic, and the reason that I'm so passionate about attachment theory is because I was insecurely attached and I had an insecure, anxious attachment style. And when I learned about attachment theory, it was an aha moment. Everything started to make sense. And when I started, working towards becoming secure, it changed my life. Everything just started to go in the right direction.
Thank you for sharing that. And I could take a deep dive into your film background, your television background, but I won't. And so, but I do. I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate how you're talking about the importance of attachment style and healing, and how those with an insecure attachment style, people often think that they're stuck with that. But you're highlighting from the beginning that we have the power to change our attachment style. We are not stuck with insecure attachment. And for those listeners who are insecurely attached, whether you're feeling the effects of being avoidant or really anxious or that more disorganized kind of combination, they can make relationships really, really tough. Just so much tougher than they need to be. And the healing isn't an easy process, but it is doable and very rewarding. So, Pablo, please tell us a little bit about what makes you you.
I think what makes me me is so I was insecure, avoidant attachment. So I had that. So I think what makes me me is really how I show up in the world, and I think it's how how much I care for my friends, my family, Rebecca, and my clients. And I think that's really important, and the ability for me to make people laugh. And I think so, and even 5 years into healing and feeling much better, I think I'm almost even not sure. Sometimes I think it's you're still trying to figure yourself out, and yeah, and I think it's really important that personally for me, when I was insecure avoidant, was my default was to kind of go into a hypo-aroused state, meaning a disconnection, disassociation, when either I got triggered or I experienced stress or conflict in my life, and that's what it was. So then what happens is I'm not present. And I think that's why when I say it's really how I show up for my friends and family, and Rebecca especially, and clients, and I stay present and I lean in when they talk, and yeah, so I think that's how I kind of show up in the world.
Wow, thank you both for being so vulnerable. And Pablo, what you're saying makes perfect sense, because for those who are avoidantly attached, that tendency to dissociate, just to cut off, you know, separate from your true self and go into this place of true avoidance with, a fear response. It's a trained response. And many people don't realize that the attachment style, it's not something we choose. It's formed generally by, 18, 24 months of age. It's not something we choose. It's something that we adopt because of what's being modeled for us and our experience. So you two are the pros here. By the way, listeners, we have a married couple here who are correct. Do I have that right? You're married, and you also work together. The counseling center you run is owned and operated by both of you, which is no easy feat to live and work together and stay harmonious in the process. So may I?
I mean,
Oh,
we're really proud of that. Yeah.
absolutely. Now, may I ask, how long have you two been married?
We've been married. Was it last year, our 10th anniversary? I think it's been 11 years now, coming on to 12.
Yeah.
And we were together 3 years before that. So,
Now, if I heard you right, Pablo, you've been working on your attachment issues for, were you saying 5 or 6 years? Tell me a little. I know we're digressing a little bit from the topic, but yet we're really in it, because it sounds as if you were together and even married while you were really still having these different attachment styles. And as we know, listeners, this isn't news to us professionals, but it may be news to you. The avoidant and the anxious attachment style often team up together, and they can just trigger the heck out of each other's wounds. The avoidance running, and the anxious is following like a little bunny, and the avoidant is running and the anxious is, and it's just exacerbating the issues. So, and you're giggling, Rebecca. Pablo, you're looking on with, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
You're just looking on. So, could you tell me a little bit about how that manifested in your relationship?
Yeah. So, if I could just go back to Dr. Carla, yeah, I've been healing for I think about 5 years now, and for me, I'm just being totally honest here. My avoidant attachment style was so severe that yeah, we were Rebecca and I were, dating for 3, 4 years before we got married. But even then, I was still a little disconnected, meaning like one foot in, one foot out, that
Mm,
kind of mentality. I never wanted to truly give 100% of who I was. I didn't want anybody to see it, even my wife. That's how terrifying it was. Because again, it's that narrative. If someone truly found out who I was, they would leave me, they would reject me, they would, all these things would happen that kind of repeats my past. So, even being in it, even married, I would just admit that I wasn't 100% in. I just wasn't, I just wasn't aware of stuff. I was often when Rebecca and I would have arguments in the past, my first instinct is because an anxious person for an avoidant person, sometimes it can be, I can interpret her coming into the room, whether it be energy, mood, facial expressions, let alone no talk at all. I just flee. I just want to get out of there because for me, it represented chaos. Again, going back to my mother. And anyway, so that's how I continued for a long time until, yeah, about 5 years ago is when I hit rock bottom. Was I started repeating the same destructive patterns. I got to a point where I had a job and I just I kind of messed it up with that same kind of pattern. And at that time, I said to, actually Rebecca said to me, like, and we had I remember the conversation we had, and it's like, okay, well, we got to separate here. Whether you can go on and continue the same destructive patterns you can do it, but you're going to do it alone, or is it here and now that you change, right? Is it here and now that you change because it's going to be really, really hard work. So for me, that was a turning point for me because it was, I was one of the books when I first started healing. One of the phrases was, if you want something you've never had, you have to do things you've never done. And, I was like 40. I was in my 40s. I was like, okay, well, let's try it because nothing's worked so far. So what do I have to lose? Because I'm at rock bottom. But, some people's rock bottom could be their springboard. And I think that's what it was for me. And I just dove in. I was open. I said, for the first time in my life, instead of deflecting everything, no, 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 no. I've been several, multiple women. No, it wasn't me. It's them. I haven't found the right one. And it kept repeating until I never reflected. And that's when it started, the true healing actually started. And for me, Rebecca, there was a course at the University of Toronto, which I took, and it started really opening my eyes. So the meditation came in first. And even then, I was still a little bit resistant. My default was to, no, I don't want to try anything new. I just want to, no, just leave me alone. And anyway, so I tried it and it was open. And I was so emotional through the whole course and the meditations. And it really kind of started reflecting inside. And for the first time, I kind of was by myself with my own thoughts. And that was terrifying. But that kind of opened my eyes and that kind of laid this foundation for me. And then from there, I started journaling. And again, even journaling, I had to go in the basement with the lights. I think I had a little candle and just read because again, the judging and criticism, just like, I don't want anybody behind, like, just that's how I used to journal. And then I went from there. I journaled 45 minutes every night. I still do the meditation, the reading, and of course the therapy. And all that combined was, I started healing. And yeah, so I encourage anyone if it's here now that they change and that they make that decision because it's going to be very, very hard work. Because as we know, there's huge dips and ups and downs for the first 6 to 12 months. And anyway, so that's my journey, and I've seen other clients do the same thing. So people do change.
wow. I just really want to pause here because what you've offered to us in such a vulnerable, genuine way is so important to honor and appreciate because often people think that because you're a clinician, whatever degree you have, that your life is perfect, that you have it all together. And the truth is, clinicians, medical practitioners, no matter who you are, right? There's always stuff behind the scenes because we're human and we are imperfect. And what you've shared, Pablo, is just such a gorgeous example and vulnerable example of how when you do your work, and we all have work, unless we're somehow perfect, and I've never met a perfect person, but when we do our work and address our wounds and go through that muck, that we can come out that other side, the idea of alchemy, turning the lead into gold. And we are turning the lead in parts of ourself often, as you're saying, Pablo, that were leaden because of childhood, not anything you did, but because of your caregiving. And for most of us, that's the case. And then when we do that work, when we wake up and are awakened to it and are willing to dive in, doing that work, it is heavy, it can be dark, but the transformative results within yourself and every relationship in your life, especially your intimate ones, is so profound. And you can tell in the way that I'm joining with you and talking about it. Not only do I witness this in my work with clients, but I've witnessed it in my own life, having come from a place of highly insecure attachment, ages ago. So anyway, thank you for sharing that piece. And you're making me think of, my fourth book was, I think, The Joy of Imperfect Love, which is based on attachment theory and how we can do this work, not just through reading a book. That's not generally going to do the trick. It's reading, it's journaling, it's meditating, it's seeing a professional therapist if you can't afford a therapist, doing work in, a group setting, and doing the work in your intimate relationship, that's where we get to, whether it's with a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a husband, a wife, a mom, whomever is available and willing to do the work with you. So much change can come from making these steps and then being bonded through doing that work together, as you both evidence. So I'm so excited and joyful and grateful to have you here because you are willing to share how difficult that journey and how genuine that journey is. But the healing is profound, body, mind, spirit. So thank you, Pablo. Rebecca, what would you like to add?
Well, I think I wanted to add that you were talking about, the different ways that you can heal with, reading or journaling or therapy or working on it in your relationship. I think that all of it is important because I think you need therapy or to work on it in your current relationship, if you're in one, because the wounds happened in relationship. So the healing needs to take place in a relationship.
Absolutely.
But then we always say to our clients, like, we always give them homework, whether they do it or not. That's another story. But we always give them homework because, as Pablo likes to say, therapy is 1 hour, right? You need to do a lot more work in all the other hours of the week, to get there. So that's why we always encourage people to read books and watch videos and journal and meditate and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing is the reason that we're called connection counseling is because we believe that you need to heal the connection with yourself before you can heal the connection in your relationship.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on so many things, including my clients. I do the same. I give homework, and I am not necessarily invested in whether they do it or not. I give it. They don't have to report back to me. I'm not their school teacher. But what happens, I agree with you. You have 50 minutes or an hour session, sometimes, an hour and a half, whatever it is. And that tiny fragment of time amidst an entire week and all the decades before getting into therapy is just a raindrop. So they have to take that work. It's actually why every book I've written has exercises in it. Because you can read a book, but if you're not doing exercises to flesh it out and flush out underlying issues, then you're staying at that surface level. You're getting it cognitively, but you might not be getting it where we really need to get it is in the body, in the soul, in the psyche. And I really appreciate what you're talking about, Rebecca, and highlighting. And the other piece, I really want to just restate what you said because it is so true. When damage occurs within a relationship, that healing must take place in relationships because then you re-experience something safe. And, a really good example is somebody who grew up being criticized all the time. Criticized. They hear criticism inside their mind. Somebody comes in the room and may say, "Oh, I like that shirt." They don't even hear, "I like that shirt." They hear sarcasm or something like, "What's the game here? You don't really like my shirt." And so only until that person can rewire themselves, trust that that person is being truly connective and truly genuine, will they then slowly be able to hear a compliment as a compliment, feedback as positive feedback, if indeed it is feedback. But many people with attachment wounds, especially depending on the type of attachment wound, they can't even take feedback because it all feels like criticism. So as they learn, wait, this person is safe. This person isn't my critical mother or my critical father. This person, really is there. That is a good example of how that healing takes place on a very small level, but it's big. So thank you for highlighting these really core pieces. Anything else,
I wouldn't mind just adding something to that if that's okay.
please?
So I think that that's a really important point where when people who have insecure attachment tend to be attracted to people who have insecure attachment. So then you have this, sometimes it's avoidant, anxious, sometimes it's avoidant. Like there's the different dynamics, but they're always insecure. And we all do this. We typically are attracted to, you know, somebody who reminds us of our parents and where the attachment wound happened. And so it's difficult when you're in it, when you're not healed yet, when you're going through the healing journey, to decipher, is this me and my perspective, right? So maybe I am too sensitive to criticism, and that wasn't a criticism. The reality is that it wasn't a criticism, but my perspective is it was a criticism because my perspective is warped because of my insecurities. But also, so for example, if you were criticized as a child, then you probably have an avoidant attachment style and you're sensitive to criticism. So then you may end up with an anxious partner who is very critical. So then sometimes it is the reality and your partner really is criticizing you. So then when you're going through the healing, it's really tough sometimes to decipher, is this a me issue or a them issue? And then you don't know how to address it. Do I address this with myself and I go try to self-soothe and talk myself down from this? Or do I address it with them?
Beautifully put, Rebecca, and you're right. That is such a big piece of it because if you are with somebody who's highly critical, then it is just re-triggering the old attachment wound. And the person may not mean to be doing it. And, it often causes those serial relationships where the person keeps getting in the relationship with the different person, but same type of dynamic. And so if they do end up with someone, when we're using the example of criticism, but there are many examples, then when they do get into relationship, if they do with somebody who has done work or is securely attached, is non-critical, that is especially when it's difficult because they're so used to that pattern of pick, criticism, that's all they hear and see. And so you're right. What do we do then? Do we go and heal ourselves? Yes, always. That's the piece you were talking about. When we heal ourselves, then we start being able to see with clearer eyes. Then we can ask a partner if indeed they are critical, hey, can we go to couples therapy, this dynamic, or hey, can you do some individual work? And then we can do some couples therapy. And if the person is truly non-critical, then they realize, oh, this is really just more of my work. That's all it is. I'm not good, bad,
Mhm.
right, wrong. I just need to keep plodding through my work. So thank you for calling out these
Mhm.
really important pieces. Let's take a look at today's question. The individual who wrote in don't know what their gender is, but they're writing in about their girlfriend. And this girlfriend wants to be connected, but this person is being told that they are avoidant. And then they gave us the example of this: I'm clean, this person's messy. They want to talk through the issues, but I just don't see any need in even bothering. Can you each speak a little bit to that? Pablo, let's start with you, please.
Sure. Like, and it's, obviously, like as Rebecca mentioned, it's this, the push pull dynamic of the anxious and avoidant. And, yeah, and I think, as I mentioned earlier, um, some avoidant people, they are very hypersensitive to, first of all, they avoid conflict often, and they try to at all costs, really. And then, and they have a hard time expressing what they want and what they need. And I find that some avoidant people also, they like to kind of slow everything down. They want to control maybe one, two, maybe three things in their life. Anything else more than that is chaos. So, and it's, to me, it's almost like, when maybe their partner comes in, and they get to be a facial expression, a mood, anything that comes in, and it's triggering them. Because again, they're also hyper, alert to that. So yeah, and maybe, and, it sounds like, it could be a little bit of chaos that's going around there that it's interpreting, it's something that's, remember, it's happening to them. It's not necessarily maybe what the partner is doing. Yeah, maybe it could be something where she could be toning it down. And, one of the things with couples coming together is have to be, they have to be vulnerable, right? And vulnerability is about being brave and courageous, being compassionate, and being connected. And,
Absolutely.
and just realizing that's okay, what's going on with my partner and vice versa, and when you experience that, that's when you actually truly come together and you start to grow, both of you. And so I think it's just something that, that he has to be brave. That person has to be brave and courageous to sit there and understand, and try to absorb it in a way that doesn't feel defensive, or something, because something is happening with them. They're being triggered.
Absolutely, Pablo. And thank you for that, for slowing it down there, because often when there is a big attachment wound, that person, that extreme sensitivity, everything is about them. They perceive, something said, "Oh, it's about them. They did it wrong." And they can get very reactive, and sometimes they close down, sometimes they get big and aggressive. And that place, which is where, when you were talking about learning to meditate, learning to slow things down, learning to pause, that then gives you the ability to reset and then come forward openly, courageously, and, with empathy for yourself and the other person. And that is where the healing work is done. But in a state of being, when there's insecure attachment, being hyper reactive, hyper alert or hypo reactive, like kind of going into that freeze response, can be really common go tos. And that's why skills, in the mindfulness realm, and not to overuse the idea of mindfulness, but learning to notice the dynamics and not react. Because if we're reacting, we're generally going back into those old pathways that are well worn and often unhealthy. So thank you, Pablo, for slowing it down. Rebecca, what would you like to weigh in on?
I would say that it sounds to me like the partner that's messy, it's because that partner wants to always talk about it, it makes me think that they're probably anxious, and the partner that wrote in is probably avoidant. So what I would say is probably happening is that something's going on with the anxious person, because if there's a mess externally in their life, there's probably some sort of mess going on internally. So there's some sort of chaos happening. So they're overwhelmed, or often anxious people have way too much on their plates and then things are falling off. So maybe that's the mess. So he might be, accurate that she's really messy. And that's not fair in a relationship. I mean, obviously it's going to happen from time to time, but if it's an ongoing issue, then she should do her part to work on that for him. But, I think what's happening for him is exactly what you said. He's reacting to that because he sees it as chaos, and that is triggering for him, so he's going to his safe zone, which is shutting down. And then the dynamic starts, because when he shuts down, then that triggers her fear of abandonment, and then she starts chasing. And when she starts chasing, then he gets triggered because he feels overwhelmed by her and probably suffocated and all of that kind of thing. Because the avoidant wants to detach for safety, and the anxious person wants to attach for safety. So, this is where the dynamic becomes really tricky. When there's stress and conflict, they need different things. And so that's why, you know, working towards becoming secure is the only solution, because otherwise you have completely different needs for safety.
That's so beautifully and succinctly put, and so true that you have these two different baseline beliefs. The avoidant, I will be safe if I run, if I detach. The anxious person, so anxious with that relationship. I will be safe if only I can connect. If only I can attach. They won't abandon me. They won't leave me. And so those two things are very much at odds. And I love the way that, Rebecca, that you talked about the mess. Often with somebody who is externally messy, there is that chaos, that messiness inside. And I've found that sometimes, and this goes, actually, I'm speaking about me, but many people that I've worked with, ages ago, I learned that if I could keep my external world, if I could make my external world beautiful and everything in place and have it look perfect, that made my messy, chaotic internal world feel better. And so, the outside could sometimes be hyper controlled because as a response to the internal messiness. And then as that's healed, whichever way it's coming from, then you get a little more gentle with the external messes on both ends of the spectrum, because again, we're going back to what you both started with, doing the internal work. Then the external messes aren't that big of a deal. We don't need to control them to feel safe. We can have our preferences. We can like things clean, and we can then do the work of couples, which is come to, as you were saying, Rebecca, come to an agreement about, there's got to be a middle ground somewhere between absolute perfect Clorox tidiness, everything in its place, and things, quote unquote, thrown everywhere.
Mhm.
So I really like how you're looking at this as, the chaos, the internal chaos can be reflected in an external state. And the other piece that I was really noticing, I'd like you two to speak to, we've talked about, how this couple is in constant conflict. It sounds as if that's what they're bringing up. And having differences in relationships is normal, it's natural, it's how we deal with the differences that makes such a big difference. And how an issue like this, even though it's about external messiness, let's talk about how the discussion about the messiness can actually lead to greater connection if the discussion happens in a clear, courageous, gentle, empathic way. Pablo.
I think it's, I just want to say that, going back to when, again, I can just think my personal view, when my experience with vulnerability, it was terrifying for me to become vulnerable because that underlying narrative of just giving 100% of to who you truly are to somebody is really terrifying. So I find that avoidants have these walls in front of their hearts and their body. It's like I can't, and so they protect it, and it's really really hard for it to kind of start shedding those, breaking down those walls. So it's really really challenging. And I would just say that again, from my perspective, like it's we are all wired for connection, right? And when you heal your relationship, you restore that trust, the safety, the emotional closeness, which that also strengthens the sense of you of belonging, and also, reducing your sense of loneliness. And again, Rebecca and I are just a good example of how we can start to mend that, come together and mend that relationship that we had. And again, I would never think 5 years ago that we would come to a place where we are now. Like our arguments used to be me running, like literally I would just run out of the house. Now it's a discussion. And it's very important that we start to reflect on us. Again, going back to the question is that when you start to do your internal work, it actually, you can see the difference in your partner, right? Something starts to change in your partner as well, you know? And just an example of, okay, let me just sit, let me just not run. And it might be a little terrifying, it might be chaos, but if I just sit and listen to my partner for 5 minutes, then it's followed by, you know what, thank you for not running. Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening. And then all of a something happens inside of you that is so empowering. Oh my gosh, that's all I had to do. Like for 30 years, I just ran, and now is that it? And that's empowering because all of a sudden encourages you to do that. What else is there? And then you become, oh my gosh. And then this is how we tackle it. And it's just one little sliver at a time. And that's how you get to a point where hopefully there's finger crossed, you just keep going, do the hard work. This will pay off, right? And you just feel so much better. Like 20% of who I was 5 years ago compared to 90% who I am now, it just feels so much better. And avoiding people tend to, anger, aggression, and rage is often very close to them. That the distance of happiness, true joy, excitement, it's too far. It's too far in the distance, but they can attain to that. So, I mean, for me to grab onto that, and that's what I used to grab onto. Now it's I can let go and things don't bother me. Like all that's been lifted. And it's only because of the relationship I had with Rebecca that helped me heal. And not only with the relationship with her, but also with the people around me, my family, my friends. As I explore the world, I'm more healthier, more secure, and more happy. And that is worth going through everything. So
Pablo, thank you. Again, you're being so genuine and vulnerable. And I want to highlight again what you were saying and the vulnerability, because it does speak to the listener's question, because it's at the root. When you go to the root of the attachment issue, realize you're not to blame. This isn't a blame or shame game. It's not about blaming your parents or caregivers. It's about realizing that if your early version of, the way I look at it in my book and in my work is, what did you learn up believing love is? If love equals criticism, love equals abuse, love equals hatred, love equals rejection, why the heck do you want to let somebody close to you in intimate relationships? No way. That's not. And this is all happening unconsciously. And so as you're growing up, if you have love equals abuse or love equals abandonment or love equals criticism, as you're in relationships with people, if you are in relationships with people who maybe don't have a good moral compass or who are critical or unkind, all of that early programming is getting unconsciously reinforced. And if you meet somebody who is genuine and true blue, even if they have some attachment issues, you're going to run like heck because that's unfamiliar. The other stuff, the mean stuff is familiar. But the kindness, the empathy, the genuineness, that's going to be unfamiliar. So your equation of love equals kindness, love equals that's not going to ring true. It might feel a little bit good, but it will feel scary. So, Pablo, you've done an excellent job of illustrating how that work, relationships will bring up the work. And when you have, and I'm going to focus on this, listeners, we're not talking about doing this work with someone who's abusive. It will not work if you have an abusive or partner or a partner with such low emotional intelligence that they can't get what you're trying to do. They can be shutting down and you're working and it's just not paying off. You need to be with someone who's also doing their work. Not about them being perfect, but doing their work. And then that's when the healing can happen together. You're working on yourself, you're working in the relationship. So, Pablo, beautifully put. Again, I am so grateful for your vulnerability because there's nothing like hearing someone, particularly a man, talk about this stuff in a really genuine way. Women were a little more accustomed to that, but hearing it from you, I'm so grateful. Thank you. Thank you. Rebecca, please, you might have something to say about what we just talked about, and please weigh in. And I'd love you, before we start wrapping up, I'd love for you to talk about something we just alluded to, but co-regulation and the importance of co-regulation, which really can only happen when you have two people doing their work. So please offer anything you want to say about what we just discussed and then co-regulation.
Well, I think with the person who wrote in with their question, I think that's exactly what they need to do. So the avoidant person is sort of avoiding his messy partner when she wants to talk, but really they need to co-regulate each other. So in that scenario, that would look like the partner that's avoidant would try to, as Pablo was saying, stay and try to understand what's happening, what the chaos is that's happening for their partner, and try to help soothe them. So try to understand their anxiety and try to calm them. And the anxious partner would, offer to give the avoidant partner some space. So, but I mean, that's at the beginning. What you want to work towards is being able to stay. So the avoidant person needs to work towards staying, and the anxious person needs to work towards not clinging or chasing. So then you come to a place where you can just be together and you can, empathize with each other and talk about it and say, what's going on for you right now? And how can I help you? The avoidant person, Pablo, is so good at grounding me, calming me down. And something as simple as, you know, maybe putting his hands, like hugging me, or sometimes he'll put his hand on my head, and it's grounding, and you feel it really helps calm you down. And the anxious person can try to give the avoidant person some space. So, for example, avoidant people sometimes, depending on how much stress is going on in their lives, they it's a spectrum, right? So they might need a little bit of space and time and separation, disconnection, or they may need more. So basically, in our relationship, I will check in with Pablo and say, do you want to do like a boys' night out? Or do you want me to go out with the girls so you can have some time alone? Because I want to check in and make sure that he is that he's able to regulate his emotions. And sometimes disconnecting helps him calm himself and helps him from feeling overwhelmed.
Really well put, Rebecca, and so important, listeners. We're talking about co-regulation. We're talking about the opposite of running or chasing. We're talking about coming together and co-regulating, getting your nervous system to a nice, calm, non-reactive level in a way that meets, maybe not perfectly, but helps, meets each person's needs.
Mhm.
And for the anxious person, that flight, again, as Rebecca said, learning to be able to stay and breathe and maybe even have a mantra, I am safe, because they still may not perceive, they may perceive the partner as the tormentor or the critical person, but they can, say, I'm safe. And for the anxious person to do their work, which might be something as simple as at first baby steps. I'm going to go outside and give you some space. I'll be, in the yard or on the porch doing some deep breathing. And something as simple as this, I found really healthy. Oftentimes, when there's disagreements, there's no agreement about how to disconnect. And a time out is often just such a precious respite for both. So being able to have language around timeouts, such as, I'm going to go take a walk around the block. I'll be back in 15 minutes. I'll check in with you when I return. We'll see if we're both in a better state. Or, hey, I'm going to go and take a drive to the store. We need milk anyway. I'll be back in a half hour and I'll have my phone with me. So, you're totally able to connect with me. Those sorts of basic reach towards co-regulation, empathy, courage, connection, those things help rewire the childhood patterns. All of those hurt and broken pieces just in something as simple as an agreement on let's do this together. So thank you for highlighting these pieces. Anything else, either of you? I know we could talk about this for hours because there are so many moving pieces in relationships. It's different for every couple. And it's about taking the time to create little conscious agreements rather than reacting from childhood programming or former relationships that were unhealthy, creating agreements, co-creating agreements that feel good in this relationship. So any other pieces, Pablo and Rebecca?
I think the last piece I think I'd like to add is that, and remind viewers, is that healing requires self-reflection,
Mm.
empathy, and accountability. And I think these skills are not only, help repair your relationships, but it also helps you grow as an individual. And I think that's very important. And yeah, and just be brave and courageous to ask yourself, is it here and now that you change? And if it is, it's going to be hard work, but I can guarantee you it will pay off. You just got to stick with it.
Thank you. Agreed. The self-reflection, if we don't reflect, we don't learn. And the self-reflection, whether you're doing it on a walk, whether you're journaling, putting aside that critic and just free journaling without letting that critic come in and beat you up a little bit more, that self-reflection, and the empathy for yourself and for other people, and the accountability. And the accountability is, again, I'm not a believer in shame or blame, but I am a big believer in using self-reflection to be able to dive deeper into what was my part in that? Did I have a part in that? And if I did have a part in that, how can I be accountable in a wholehearted way? How can I apologize and really mean it and make amends if amends are necessary? So thank you for highlighting that, Pablo. So, and in my opinion, a lot of people think that being accountable, taking responsibility, apologizing, that there are weaknesses. I see them when it's an appropriate apology, when it's coming from your heart. I see that not as only as healing to the self and the relationship, but as an act of courage. And sometimes courage, when we're doing something that feels uncomfortable, but we know is right, it can be a huge act of courage. So thank you, Rebecca.
Yes, I mean, self-reflection is key. And also the empathy part. I think when we get triggered, we're so quick to blame and judge the other person. So I think if you can turn that into curiosity instead and say, okay, they did this thing that triggered me. I wonder what's going on for them. Why did they do that? Why are they acting that way? And then just ask, without judgment in your tone is key, right? Like what, like just literally, what's going on with you? Like, are you okay? Um, that kind of thing, because then you can start to understand the other person. And then once you understand what's going on for them, it doesn't feel like an attack on you.
Absolutely. And listeners, that might sound like a simple point, but it's a big one because when there is that empathy and that self-reflection, and we'll keep using the example of criticism because it's such a common one. If your partner says something that you perceive as criticism, you get to say, I feel criticized when you said X, Y, or Z. So you're healing yourself in a way by verbalizing what you heard. You're letting the other person look at that in a non-judgmental way and say, when I called you a block, 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 I can see how you would perceive that as criticism. Yeah, I am so sorry. And I will steer clear of doing that again. And if, I heard this a lot as a kid, so I think it's in my programming, I'm not excusing it. But if I do it again, please call it to my attention because I really want to work to get that out of my vocabulary because I can see that it hurts you and I love you. I don't want to hurt you. And so we learn to do those kind of sincere apologies. Believe it. I've been there. We are healing the self as we are healing the other person and their wounds. And we are therefore healing the third of the relationship. Such a win-win. Oh my goodness. You two are amazing. I am so delighted that you shared such beautiful parts of your practice and your personal lives with me, with our guests. What a privilege. Where can our listeners find you and your amazing work?
We are on YouTube. We have Connection Counseling YouTube channel. We're on Instagram, Connection Counseling there as well. And they can also visit our website, which is Connection Counseling. And because we're Canadian, counseling is spelled with 2 L's, and we are .ca because that's Canada.
Excellent. And listeners, don't worry if you don't have a pen handy. All of these pieces will be in the show notes, but I'll give you the spelling of Rebecca's name. It's Rebecca, Webster, Wbster, Rebecca Webster. And Pablo, her husband, is Pablo Alvarez, Alvarez. And they are Connection Counseling, and it's CONNECTION, counseling, COUNSELLING.ca. Again, links will be in the show notes. You will be able to find them on YouTube, Instagram, and their website. So thanks again, you dynamic duo, for joining us today. What a joy. What a privilege.
Yes.
Thank you,
this is
Dr.
wonderful. Yeah. Thank you very
Been an
much
honor.
for having us. Yes.
Such a privilege. And thank you, both of you, truly. What a blessing. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. It's such a privilege, such an honor, and such a joy to connect with you in each of these episodes. And this is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanley.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manley wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.